Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Yahweh, our Elohim, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah, of Joshua chapter 1, verses 7 and 8. Okay, yeah, so last week's Torah portion, Yitro, explained that exactly 7 weeks after the exodus from Egypt, which is 49 days, okay, after the Passover, and Israel leaving Egypt, Moses gathered the Israelites at the foot of Mount Sinai to enter into covenant with Yahweh. In a dramatic display of thunder, lightning, billowing smoke, and fire, Yahweh descended upon the mountain and recited the 10 commandments, okay? Or in Hebrew, actually, to be more accurate, the 10 words to the people. Upon hearing the law's categorical requirements, the people shrank back in fear and begged Moses to be their mediator before Elohim. The people then stood far off while Moses drew near to the thick darkness to receive the various laws and rules from Yahweh. This week's Torah portion begins with Moses in the midst of this thick cloud of Sinai and receiving additional instructions regarding civil law for the Israelite people. And it begins with Yahweh saying, now these are the judgments. Okay, and this is where the name of our Torah portion comes from. Okay, but however, the word Mishpatim, okay, there are, when I read different versions and I'm doing my research, they put down the word Mishpatim as it can be laws also, regulations, rulings, judgments, ordinances, or statutes. Okay, and all of these Mishpatim, okay, refers to the horizontal relationship between our fellow human beings. Okay, that means men to men and men to women. Okay, whereas when they say normally mitzvot or commandments, okay, it is speaking about the vertical relationship between ourselves and Yahweh. Okay, so that's the difference between mitzvot, commandments, and mishpatim, which can mean laws, rules, regulations, rulings, judgments, ordinances, or statutes. Okay, yeah. Now, the root word is actually from of mishpatim is shafat, okay, which means to judge. All right, yeah, and that's where let me skip that. Sorry, okay, too complicated to go into that. So 11.5%, okay, is stated by the Jewish sages that all of the mitzvot are found in this particular Torah portion of Mishpatim, okay, 11.5%, which is 53 of all of what the Jews believe to be the 613 commandments that are derived, okay, from the Torah are found in this particular section. So in this portion of Mishpatim, it includes a wide range of civil laws, criminal laws, ritual laws, financial laws, family laws, and also the laws to celebrate what do you call that, Shabbat and the Moadim, which means the feast. Okay, and these civil laws, okay, are, as I mentioned to you, between man and his fellow men. Okay, horizontal relationships. Now, for instance, slavery was socially tolerated, okay, but it was to be practiced in a humane and orderly manner. Okay, so if a Jewish male was sold into slavery as restitution for a theft, he must be freed after no more than 6 years of servitude. Okay, if he got married during his servitude, his master was required to support his wife and children. On the other hand, if the master gave the slave a wife during his servitude, she and the children would remain with the master after he was freed, unless the man decided to remain with them, in which case he would make a solemn declaration before a Beit Din, which is a law court, okay, Israeli law court, and have his ear bored, okay, with an awl to indicate that he is now part of the master's family and clan, okay. Now, if a Jewish girl, however, was sold into slavery by her father, she was not automatically freed after 6 years of servitude, okay, but must be redeemed from a master. The sages state that a man could only sell his daughter until she reached 12 years old, okay, of age, right? But only if it was for her benefit. Meaning what? With the intent that she was to be married to a master or the master's son. Okay? So if she displeased her master, she could not be resold to a foreigner, but must be redeemed. Okay? That means purchased back by her own relatives. And if she was married to the master or his son, then she was to be treated as a freeborn Jewish woman with all of the same rights attending to the role in Jewish society and not considered a slave anymore. Okay. Now, in regards to slavery in the Bible, biblical slavery is very different from the slavery of the blacks, okay, or the slavery of the Israelites when they were in Egypt. Okay. And the three instances as far as I know, as how Israelite can become a slave is number one, he cannot pay a debt off because of theft. All right. Yeah. So he stole something and he's got to pay the fine and he can't pay. Then this is the main reason he's sold into slavery. Number two, as I just mentioned just now, that a person sells his family member, especially a daughter, okay, into slavery to another family to be married. Okay. And then after that, the third one is if a person becomes too poor or some other situation and he decides to sell himself or herself into slavery. Okay. Yeah. And in that case, he or she comes under a master and then they are taken care of and the poverty is gone. Okay. Now, regarding slaves, if a master then struck and killed his non-Jewish slave, he was to be punished by the law court. However, if the slave died several days after the beating, he was not found liable. Okay, why? This is because it is assumed that he did not intend to actually kill the slave. All right, that was the reasoning. So if the slave was permanently injured in the beating, then he was to be set free. Okay. Now, some laws carried the death penalty, and this included premeditated murder, cursing one's parents. Okay, I wonder how many in the modern era, okay, would receive this penalty right now. Okay, yeah, then kidnapping, practicing witchcraft, and engaging in bestiality, okay, and offering sacrifices to idols. Now, according to various Jewish sages, okay, the famous statement that has been also picked up by the world, which is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, okay, did not literally apply. That means if you blind someone, it doesn't mean that that person comes and blinds you, okay, but actually refers to the administration of equitable justice, okay, to redress the damages that was inflicted upon a person, okay. Yeah, so I hope that you yeah, understand this. So I mean, when we read in the account of the Bible, you don't actually find that if a person's tooth is knocked out, then you go, then the penalty is go and knock out the other person's tooth. So it is not a literal statement, but rather it is for to administer justice, okay, equitable justice to redress the damages. So other laws and ordinances concern cases of personal injury, the treatment of strangers, widows and orphans, okay, laws about loans, which must be interest-free, okay, between Jews, especially when you are lending to the poor, and various other matters, including the dedication of the firstborn to Yahweh, the prohibition of bearing false witness in courts, the restriction against eating meat of an animal torn by beasts in the field, okay, the law of the Shemitah, which is the sabbatical 7th year, okay, during which the land was to lie fallow, the complete abstention from work on Shabbat, and the three pilgrimage festivals, okay, in Hebrew, Shalosh Regalim, okay, which is Pesach, Passover, Shavuot, Pentecost, and Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. All right. Yeah. Also, the prohibition of boiling a kid in its mother's milk, which later on all sorts of restrictions were derived from, okay, under the rabbinical formulation of what they call kashrut okay, or the kosher laws. I will come to that later on, and I will give more details on that. So after giving this various mitzvot, okay, or mishpatim, Yahweh promised Moshe that his angel or Malak Adonai would grant and protect the Israelites until they arrive in the land of Canaan, but on the condition that the people obey his voice. This angel, okay, would drive out the enemies of Israel and assure their victory in the promised land. Okay, as messianic believers in Yeshua, we, as I mentioned in the past, we believe that this Malak Adonai, the angel of Yahweh, okay, was none other than Yeshua himself in his pre-incarnate form, okay, in the Old Testament. Now, as a mediator of the covenant, Moses then reported to the Israelites all the words of Yahweh and all of the Mishpatim, okay, all of the regulations and judgments and ordinances. And the people responded in unison, okay, all the words which Yahweh has said, we will do. Okay, he then wrote down the words of the covenant, built an altar at the foot of Mount Sinai with 12 pillars, one for each tribe, and ordered sacrifices to Yahweh to be made. Okay, and this is when the Israelites offered sacrifices. And remember, the first person to offer sacrifice to Yahweh after their exodus was not any of the Israelites, but Jethro himself, as you read in the last Torah portion. Okay, yeah. So then after that, Moses took the sacrificial blood from the offerings, threw half upon the altar, and read the covenant to the people. The people ratified the covenant with the words again, all that Yahweh has said, we will do and obey. Kol asher diber Yahweh na'aseh v'nishma. Okay, and upon hearing their ratification, Moses took the other half of the sacrificial blood and threw it on the people, saying, behold, the blood of the covenant that Yahweh has made with you in accordance with all of these words. And this whole act here, okay, including with what we read last week with the 10 commandments, okay, that constitutes the marriage covenant between Israel, the bride, and Yahweh, the bridegroom, okay, and this is the ketuvah, okay, the marriage covenant or the marriage contract. So next, Moses, Aaron, and then his two sons, Nadab and Abihu, who later on in the coming Torah portions, very sadly was consumed by fire because they, okay, offered strange fire to Yahweh. Okay, and the 70 of the elders of Israel ascended Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb to eat a covenant affirmation meal, okay, between Klal Israel, okay, and Yahweh. So this is the congregation of Israel and Yahweh. So it was there that the elders beheld the awesome glory, okay, of the Elohim of Israel, under whose feet was a pavement of sapphires, like the very heaven for clearness. Again, and this person, okay, that the Israelites had a covenant meal with on Mount Sinai was none other than Yeshua himself in his pre-incarnate form, okay. So after returning from the mountain with the elders, Yahweh commanded Moses to go back up to receive the tablets of stone, okay, inscribed with the 10 words. Followed by Yehoshua or Joshua, who remained down below, Moses reascended the mountain, which was still covered in a shining cloud of fire. On the 7th day, okay, he heard the voice of Yahweh calling to him from the midst of the cloud of glory, and then entered into the presence of Yahweh. He remained on the mountain for a total of 40 days and 40 nights while the Israelites waited for him at the camp down below. Now, the Haftarah portion, okay, is chosen, and it is very clear that it's linked to the passage of slavery, okay, and the release of the slaves, okay, in the year of Shemitah. After 6 years of slavery, in the 7th, they are to be released, okay. So, but the Haftarah reading also provides a stark contrast, okay, from our Torah portion. Mishpatim opens with the commandments about releasing slaves. But the reading from Jeremiah reports how the people of Judah betrayed the Hebrew slaves of that day. Okay. So King Zedekiah had earlier made a covenant with the people to free all Hebrew slaves according to the 7-year cycle of permissible slavery mentioned in our portion, hoping that by doing so, Elohim will be merciful and spare Judah from a Babylonian invasion that was coming upon them. Okay, after a while, it appeared that the Babylonians were not going to attack Jerusalem, and the crisis seemed to pass. So after that, they acted treacherously, and the former slave owners reneged on their covenant and took back their slaves. So the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah again, and Elohim rebuked the people for their treachery and pronounced judgment upon them. Instead of withdrawing from Judah, Yahweh will now bring the Babylonians back, and they will raise Jerusalem and all the cities of Judah entirely. Okay, and then it is declared, therefore says Yahweh, you have not obeyed me by proclaiming liberty, everyone to his brother and to his neighbor. Behold, I proclaim to you liberty to the sword, to pestilence and to famine, declares Yahweh. I will make you a horror to the kingdoms of the earth, and the men who transgressed my covenant and did not keep the terms of the covenant that they made before me, I will give into the hand of their enemies. Their dead bodies shall be food for the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And Zedekiah, king of Judah, and his officials I will give into the hand of their enemies, and into the hand of those who seek their lives, into the hand of the army of the king of Babylon, which has withdrawn from you. Behold, I command, declares Yahweh, and I will bring them back to this city, and they will fight against it and take it and burn it with fire. I will make the cities of Judah a desolation. Okay, yeah, so be careful, as the scripture says. I think this we will come in future Torah portions. That do not make, because you covenant and you break it and you. Now, the last two verses of the Haftarah, if you read, okay, that seems to have no connection at all with the earlier one, okay, which is in Jeremiah 33, 25 to 26. Let me read that. Jeremiah chapter 33, 25 to 26. Okay, this says Yahweh, if my covenant is not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the laws of the heavens and the earth, then I would also reject the descendants of Jacob and David my servant, so that I should not take his descendants to be rulers over the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For I shall turn back their captivity and have compassion upon them. Okay, and these two verses, okay, were added by the sages to soften the message, okay, of rebuke and seemingly condemnation, okay, upon the people of Israel, and to provide hope, okay, for there is hope always for Israel, since Elohim's sovereign purposes are fixed according to counsel of his own good pleasure, okay, yeah, and it is always in Yahweh's heart, right, to do good to his people. It is only when they transgress and they do evil, not only evil, but when evils are multiplied, that is when it reaches a certain stage, okay, that he says enough is enough. And he brings judgments, okay, upon the people of Israel. And unfortunately, the Jews and the Israelites did that over and over and over again by bloodshed, passing their babies through fire as sacrifices to Molech, and idolatry in the land, and so many other things. Okay. Yeah. So from this whole portion, as I mentioned, okay, the Jews derive 613 mitzvot, okay, or commandments, and in Hebrew, this is sometimes called Taryag, Taryag, okay, and it is an acronym, okay, that comes from the letters Tav, Resh, Yod, and Gimel, okay, and when you pronounce that in Hebrew, is Taryag, all right. Yeah, and when you add the gematria of Taryag together, Tav is 400, Resh is 200, that brings you to 600, Yod is 10, okay, which is 610, and Gimel is 3, okay, so that also adds up to 613, okay, so yeah, this is where the Jews believe there are 613 commandments. Okay, and when they add up the word Tariq together, it's also 613 in the Gematria. Now, however, the Jewish sages themselves do not entirely agree. Okay, what are these 613 commandments? So, from certain, just like in Christianity, okay, when you look at the Protestant denominations, there are like, I can't remember at last count whether there was 20,000 or 40,000 denominations, okay, in Christianity, Protestantism. In Judaism, it's also the same, all right? A lot of denominations under different rabbis and sages and, different teachers, right? So they all agree that 613, the major ones, they agree on what they are, but they don't exactly agree what, that the 613 are entirely the same, okay? Yeah, so Jewish tradition divides this 613 into 248 positive thou shall commandments, okay, and 365 negative thou shall not commandments, okay? Yeah, you might think that that is a lot, okay, but when you go to the New Testament, okay, New Testament scholars have found that there are that somebody want to guess how many distinct commandments can be identified in the New Covenant books. Okay, in the New Testament, does anybody want to take a guess? Do you think there are more or less than 613 commandments? Anyone?
More.
Who said more?
Siêu Biên here.
Siu Bian. Okay, Siu Bian, you are absolutely correct. Okay. There are more, okay? The scholars have identified there are 1,000 over distinct commandments, okay, that have been identified in the New Testament. All right, yeah. So if you think that the Old Testament is legalistic and there are many commandments and laws to keep, all right, the New Testament has actually got more when you break them down, okay? Because why? The King speaks, and when the King speaks, his words become laws, all right? And Yeshua declared in his word, if you love me, keep my commandments, okay? Yeah, yes, we are under grace, okay? Yeah, but the law, again, has not been abolished in that sense, okay? You don't keep the law to be saved, but you keep his commandments because you are saved and because you love him and you want to obey him, right? So that's a very big difference, okay? From when you pass from the old to the new covenant, all right? Now, as we go into Exodus chapter 12, verse 2, all right, I'll read from verse 1. These are the Mishpatim, okay, the regulations or the stipulations, the statutes, ordinances, judgments, okay, or rulings, which you are to set before the Israelites. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he serves 6 years, and in the 7th, he goes out free, okay? Yeah, so when we open Parashat Mishpatim, the first ruling in this Parashat, okay, is about the lowliest of the Hebrews, okay, and shows Yahweh's heart to Israel. Okay, after all, Israel had just come out of slavery, okay? Yeah, so slavery in the Bible was biblical, but as I mentioned, it was different from the slavery in Egypt or the slavery of the blacks or any other kind of slavery. And if you think slavery has been abolished, when you go to America right now, it's actually pretty bad. Okay, there is an underground slave trade, especially for children and for women being trafficked as, unfortunately, what is the term for it? Sex slaves. Okay, which is very, very sad. And many of the people who try to escape poverty from South America, especially, okay, when they come, they are forced into prostitution to pay off the cartels who bring them over. And if they do not go into prostitution, then a family back home is threatened and killed, and that's very, very sad. Anyways, yeah, I don't want to go into that too much. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the 3 instances when people goes into slavery, okay, was mentioned, already mentioned just now. And when you read in Exodus chapter 22, verses 1 to 3, it gives one of the instances where a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he repays 5 cattle, okay, for an ox, or 4 sheep for a sheep. So you steal one and you repay either 5 or 4. Okay, so if the thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there is no guilt for his bloodshed. If the sun has risen on him, there is guilt for his bloodshed. He shall certainly repay. If he has not the means, then he shall be sold for theft, right? So that is one of the instances why a person goes into slavery. So now, as we went to the portion of Jeremiah, all right, that we was read earlier. Okay, now I don't want to reread it. I hope that you can remember the instances. Okay, so this whole event happened 900 plus years. Okay, after Yahweh gave this ruling to Israel, and because they kept violating and breaking this law, okay, this Mishpat, eventually Yahweh punished them for this by killing them and exiling the rest. Okay, now this was added to them, okay, on top of them violating, okay, the sabbatical years or the Shemitahs to let the land lie fallow. Okay, so 70 Shemitahs, okay, to be exact, were violated, and therefore they were exiled for 70 years for every Shemitah they violated. Okay, I will read the law of the Shemitah shortly. Okay, so now when you go to Chronicles, 2 Chronicles chapter 36 verse 21. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, 21. Okay, in order to fulfill the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths, okay, her Shemitahs, as long as she lay waste, she kept Shabbat until 70 years were completed. Okay, and then in Jeremiah chapter 25 verse 11 and 12, it states the same thing. Jeremiah 25, 11 and 12. Okay, verse 11, and all this land shall be a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. And it shall be when 70 years are completed that I shall punish the king of Babylon and that nation and the land of the Kasdim for their crookedness, declares Yahweh, and shall make it everlasting ruins. Okay, yeah, so this was because they violated, okay, both the laws of the Shemitah, the portion of the Haftarah for breaking covenant by taking back the slaves, and also all of the things I mentioned earlier. Okay, now again, as I mentioned, Yahweh is patient. Okay, he is long suffering, but his grace is not never ending, like what many people in the hyper grace, okay, or the radical grace movement believes. Okay, even as I mentioned before, a certain pastor in Israel, which is my good friend, who actually was come into this radical hyper grace theology, said that, told me that even he, as a pastor, if he were to have intercourse with a woman, and commit adultery, and in the midst of adultery have a heart attack and die, he will still go to heaven, because that is such the grace God that Yahweh extends. Okay, and that is the teaching of hyper grace or hyperparousia, radical grace, which is completely wrong, because when, as I read to you last week, okay, I gave you two portions of scripture in the New Testament, Chronicles and Revelation, okay, that no adulterer, okay, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, right? So you cannot have whatever you believe contradict the word of Yahweh, okay? So understand that Yahweh is patient, he is long suffering, but his grace is not never ending. And there is a time that he says enough is enough, okay? And it's declared in Genesis chapter 3, okay? Genesis chapter 3 verses, Genesis chapter 6, verse 3 and verse 5 to 8, okay? That his spirit will not strive with men forever because their thoughts are continually wicked. Okay, so let us take heed to it and work out our salvation with fear and with trembling. Okay, also in Hebrews, okay, chapter 10, verses 29 to 31. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 29 to 31. And I want you to really take heed of this scripture. Okay, how much worse punishment do you think shall he deserve who has trampled the Son of Elohim underfoot, counted the blood of the covenant by which he was set apart as common, and insulted the spirit of favor. For we know him who has said, vengeance is mine, I shall repay, says Yahweh. And again, Yahweh shall judge his people. It is a fearsome thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. Okay, yeah, so let us take heed on this, brothers and sisters, right? And always know that his grace is sufficient, in the sense that if you are repentant, all right, and if you come back to him with true remorse in your heart, he will forgive you, all right? Especially when you purpose, not by might, nor by power, but by his Ruach HaKodesh, okay, to not do it again, and to put the Shubha. That means not only to say it with your mouth, but do a 180-degree turnaround and head in the opposite direction, okay? So the law of the Shemitah is found in Exodus chapter 23, verses 10 to 12. Okay, Exodus 23, 10 to 12. And for 6 years you are to sow your land and shall gather its increase. But the 7th year you are to let it rest, okay, and shall leave it. And the poor of your people shall eat. And what they leave the beasts of your field eat. Do the same with your vineyard and your olive yard. 6 days you are to do your work, and on the 7th day you'll rest. Okay, you rest, in order that your ox and your donkey might rest, and the son of your female servant and the sojourner shall be refreshed. Okay, so as you can see down here, they tie the weekly Shabbat, okay, that you work for 6 days and you rest on the 7 days, to the yearly Shabbats, okay, or the Shemitahs. That 6 years you sow and you work, and then on the 7th you let your land rest, okay, which means what? Your beasts and your servants also rest. All right, yeah. So many people in Christianity don't understand this Shemitah cycle, okay, and basically it is a cycle. It is a 7-year cycle that repeats over and over again. All right. So once you work for 6 years, then on the 7th year is a Shemitah. Then after that, you start again another 7-year cycle. Okay. And the last 7-year tribulation is also a Shemitah cycle. So not start and end at any time. Okay. But the 7 last years of the tribulation starts when a Shemitah cycle starts and ends when a Shemitah cycle ends. And this is why it is so important to understand the calendar of Yahweh and to understand the Shemitah cycles. Okay, yeah. And now, if I'm not mistaken, we are into the 2nd year plus 3rd year of this particular Shemitah cycle. Okay, yeah. So now, whether we understand the effects of the Shemitah or not, okay, it actually affects us whether you know it or not, okay. And if I don't have the time to go into it today, but if any of you have heard and read the book, okay, by Jonathan Kahn, okay, about the Shemitah, all right, and I heard his teachings, you would understand that every 7 years, okay, there is a stock market crash, okay, and that is one of the effects of the Shemitah, right? So I don't have the time to go into it today because I want to cover other things, but I would encourage you, okay, go and search Jonathan Kahn's sermon about the Shemitahs, okay, and understand how the Shemitahs affect us, okay, whether we understand it, believe it or not, it affects us some way or another, okay, yeah, and especially it is important in the 7 last years, okay, and that is also a Shemitah cycle, all right. So now, one of the things that I do want to share is I found this to be quite interesting. Okay, I was born in the year of Shemitah, which was 1973. Okay, then I was called into full-time ministry also. Okay, and I left my business in the Shemitah of 2008. Right, then 7 years later, I took my first sabbatical year in the Shemitah year of 2015. Okay, and then after that, my second sabbatical cycle was in 2022, which was also a Shemitah year. Okay, yeah, and actually I had no concept, all right, of about the Shemitas and that I had to actually take it. All right, all I knew at that time was that I was still in the Methodist church, serving as an assistant pastor to my senior pastor. And in the Methodist church, after a certain amount of time, the pastors are given a sabbatical. All right. And when they take a sabbatical, they are fully paid in their year off, and most of them go for higher studies. All right. Yeah. And that is actually not what a sabbatical is supposed to be, because you're supposed to rest. Now, however, when I was in the 6 year of a full time ministry, Yahweh actually me changed the entire year off. And I was like, couldn't have telling me, because I'm like, Lord, how can we an entire year off? We are so busy in the ministry, okay, and to take the Shabbat off, okay, and to rest in the Shabbat, I had to force myself and to remind myself, okay, that despite the amount of work that we had to do, and it was really overwhelming at certain points, okay, not all the time, at certain points in time, especially like when we had a huge national or regional or international events like the All Malaysian Golden Gate Revival Communication that we were organizing, okay? Yeah, that we slept very little, 2 to 4 hours on a daily basis for 3 to 6 months at a time, and yeah, that those were the times that I really had to force myself to take Shabbats off also. So when Yahweh said I had to take an entire year off, I'm like, Lord, that does not make sense. We are so busy working for you and for your kingdom. How can we take an entire year off? How is the work going to continue? What is going to happen? And furthermore, okay, understand, brothers and sisters, we don't minister for finance, but as we minister, this is when finance comes in. Okay. Yeah. So I was telling Yahweh, I mean, if we stop ministering, I mean, how are we going to survive? Where is the money going to come in? And Yahweh spoke to me very clearly, and he says, if you've got the faith to take your sabbatical, not only will I provide for you, okay, but I will raise up people in your stead so that in your absence, not only will the ministry continue, but it will multiply in your absence. And I know that was a very clear Rhema word. So I said, okay, Lord, I do have the faith. Okay, I don't understand it, but I will step out in faith. All right. Yeah. So as we did that, I mean, certain amazing things happen. And when you read on later in future Torah portions, it tells you that, okay, when you take the sabbatical, okay, what will happen is that in the 6th year, Yahweh will provide double, okay, or I think double to triple. That will sustain you through the sabbatical year, the 7th year, and through the 8th year, that as you start to plant your crops in the field again, there will be sustenance until the harvest comes in, right? Yeah, so that was actually, in a sense, what happened to us, okay? Yeah, so in the 6th year, for the first time, normally when we, how to say, our ministry accounts are actually quite, what is the right word to put? Okay, not very healthy. Okay, there's not always a lot of money in it. And normally, before we go for our missions to the Holy Land, supernaturally it swells up. Okay, so for Vinci and myself to go and also to bless others, okay, to go to the Holy Land, those whom Yahweh has directed us to help to go. All right, then after that, when we come back, it always shrinks back down. That is the case for the 5 years. Okay, but in the 6th year, for the first time after we went for our mission and we came back, there was the surplus. And that was Yahweh speaking to me, okay? I'm giving you evidence that I'm going to provide for you throughout. And that, stayed my heart. I said, okay, Lord, I will step out in faith. And the amazing thing was that not only did Yahweh provide in our sabbatical year, in our year of Shemitah, but it was crazy, okay? When we did not work, Yahweh blessed us a lot more, okay, than when we were actually engaged in active ministry. And that was a miracle beyond miracles, okay? And at that time, we were under the mentorship of John Mulinde. And one of the things that he did tell us is, if Yahweh blesses you during this time here, travel, go and see the world.